QuitSmokingWeed.com, the podcast on Spotify.
You know, you have heard the two letters 100 times. THC and CBD, usually in the exact same breath, as if they were just two flavors of the exact same thing.
Yeah, and they really are not. One of them is the reason quitting is incredibly hard.
And the other barely even touches the part of your brain that got you hooked in the first place. Getting this biological difference straight completely changes how you think about quitting.
It also clarifies whether CBD is an actual tool to help you stop or just, a piece of highly effective marketing hype.
Because when you talk to people trying to cut down, there is just so much frustration out there. They are constantly told CBD is this miracle cure for everything under the sun, while they simultaneously wonder which specific part of the plant actually caused their dependence.
And that confusion leaves people feeling totally stuck.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the biology to finally separate the science from the marketing. We are going to look at what these compounds really are, why only one of them drives the high, and how understanding your own nervous system is the first step to getting unstuck.
Well, to understand why quitting feels so physically and mentally demanding, we really have to look at what is actually happening inside your body when you consume cannabis. The entire mechanism relies heavily on something called the ECS, that stands for the endocannabinoid system.
Okay, let us break that down right away. What exactly is this system doing when we are not putting cannabis into our bodies? Because people often think this system only exists to process weed.
That is a very common misconception, actually. The ECS is an ancient, incredibly complex cell signaling network that exists in all mammals. It is basically your body's master regulatory network.
So it is doing something else entirely in the background.
Right. It exists to keep your internal environment stable and balanced. The ECS controls your mood, your memory formation, your pain perception, your appetite, your sleep cycles, and how your body responds to daily stress.
Wow, so it is handling a massive amount of our baseline functioning.
It really is. It is constantly making these tiny micro adjustments in the background to keep you functioning normally. But when you consume cannabis, you are introducing external chemical compounds that interface directly with this highly sensitive, finely tuned network.
And the absolute heavy hitter in that process is THC.
Yes, THC is the main driver there.
So THC is the psychoactive one, the one that actually gets you high and alters your perception.
Correct. THC binds directly and forcefully to specific locks in your brain called CB1 receptors. These receptors are densely packed in the specific areas of the ECS that control pleasure, memory, and coordination.
So go straight for those specific control centers.
Exactly. When THC hits your system, it floods these receptors. That sudden, massive activation is what produces the high. It triggers the euphoria, the altered perception of time, the dramatically increased appetite, and for many people, the severe spikes in anxiety or paranoia.
I often think of THC binding to those CB1 receptors, like a master key forcing its way into a control room and completely overriding the system. It just kicks the door down and takes over the controls for mood and appetite all at once.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The brain is not making micro adjustments anymore. It is just responding to the master key.
But here's where I get tripped up. If this is just a temporary override, why does it turn into a long-term dependence? I mean, a high wears off after a few hours, so why does the control room not just go back to normal operations?
The problem is that the human brain is highly efficient, and it is always seeking homeostasis, which is that state of internal balance we just mentioned. When you regularly flood the control room with THC, your brain detects a massive overstimulation at those CB1 receptors.
Okay, making sense so far.
So it realizes the system is being chemically hijacked on a daily basis. To protect itself from this constant overstimulation, the brain physically adapts.
Wait, it actually changes its own structure to deal with the master key?
Yes. It initiates a biological process called downregulation.
So you are saying the brain actually removes the locks on the doors because there are too many master keys floating around?
Precisely. The brain essentially pulls the receptors inside the cell. It physically reduces the density of CB1 receptors available on the surface of your neurons. It removes the locks.
And this physical adaptation is what we call tolerance.
Right. Because you have fewer receptors available to catch the chemical signals, you now require more THC just to achieve the exact same effect you used to get from a much smaller amount.
Because you have to smoke more or consume stronger edibles just to force the remaining doors open.
Exactly. So when people say they are hooked on weed, they are really talking about a specific biological dependence on THC. The plant itself is complicated, but the dependence is tied to that one compound.
Completely. And when you stop consuming THC after a long period of heavy use, your brain is left with a severe deficit of active receptors.
Because the external master key is suddenly gone, but your brain has not put the normal internal locks back on the doors yet.
So that receptor deficit creates the physical and psychological withdrawal symptoms. Your internal control room is suddenly understaffed. It cannot regulate your mood, your sleep, or your appetite properly because the cellular machinery has been altered.
That is exactly what happens during withdrawal.
I really love this point in the science because it is profoundly hopeful. We have to frame this dependence accurately for people listening. This is not permanent brain damage. It is strictly a reversible mechanical adjustment.
I agree completely. Your brain simply adapted to a heavy external input. If you take that input away, the brain will absolutely build those pathways back.
It is incredibly resilient like that. When the THC stops entering the system, the brain recognizes the deficit.
Yes, and it begins the slow work of upregulating those receptors. It puts the locks back on the doors to restore your natural balance. It just takes time and patience for the cellular machinery to rebuild itself.
Okay, so knowing that THC acts as this aggressive master key on the CB1 receptors, it is vital to understand why CBD is so different. People talk about them like they are a package deal, and confusing the two leads to a lot of failed quitting attempts.
It really does.
I mean, they come from the exact same plant, so is CBD just picking the same lock in the control room?
Not at all. CBD works completely differently in the brain. It does not bind to the CB1 receptors in the same direct, forceful way that THC does. Because it bypasses that main lock, it is entirely non-intoxicating.
So it simply does not get you high no matter how much of it you consume.
Correct.
Then what is the point of it? If it is not kicking in the door to the control room, how is it doing anything at all?
Well, instead of flooding those primary receptors, CBD interacts with secondary networks in the body. It nudges the system rather than hijacking it. For example, it engages with your serotonin receptors.
Those are the specific pathways involved in anxiety regulation and mood stability, right?
Yes. And it also interacts with what we call TRPV1 channels.
We need to translate that one. What is a TRPV1 channel?
Think of them as the body's internal pain and temperature sensors. They help regulate inflammation and how you physically perceive discomfort. CBD modulates these secondary pathways.
So it acts more like a gentle thermostat rather than a sledgehammer.
Exactly. Because it nudges your serotonin system, it is basically telling your brain's anxiety center to take a deep breath. It whispers to the systems that regulate your panic response.
But because it does not flood the CB1 receptors, it cannot possibly replace the high.
No, it cannot.
This explains so much of the frustration I hear from people. Someone who is trying to quit will run out and buy a bottle of CBD expecting it to scratch the itch. They desperately want it to be a replacement master key.
And when it does not deliver that familiar buzz, it severely disappoints them. It is destined to disappoint anyone looking for a direct replacement for the intoxicating effects of THC.
Because it does not hit the dopamine pathways that the brain is actively craving during early withdrawal. It does not provide the chemical escape hatch. I frequently hear people write off CBD as completely useless just because it does not provide that intoxication. But I mildly disagree with that total dismissal. Nudging the system and interacting with those serotonin pathways might not get you high, but gently knocking on the side door of the control room clearly has its own distinct biological value.
It does have value. In fact, understanding the specific value is crucial when we look at why modern cannabis users are experiencing such severe dependence compared to users from decades past.
Are you talking about the difference between the weed people smoked in the 1970s versus what they're buying at a dispensary today?
I am. Modern weed is meticulously engineered to be extremely high in THC and incredibly low in CBD. Decades of selective breeding by commercial cultivators were dedicated entirely to maximizing the psychoactive compound.
Because they wanted the strongest possible master key to deliver the most intense high.
Exactly. And in the process of chasing that potency, cultivators bred CBD down to almost zero in most commercial strains.
That blows my mind every time I think about it. They literally bred the safety net out of the plant.
That is exactly what happened. Historically, CBD acted as a natural buffer within the plant.
Yeah.
Because it interacts with those serotonin receptors and modulates anxiety, it actually moderated some of THC's more negative effects.
So it naturally took the edge off the severe anxiety, the racing heart, and the paranoia that high doses of THC can trigger.
Like it did.
I remember reading about this and feeling genuinely shocked. It is wild to realize that the industry basically optimized the plant for addiction. They intentionally stripped out the one compound that kept the user from freaking out just to chase a stronger high for the consumer.
It really is like removing the brakes from a car just to make it go a little faster.
Mm-mm.
The outcome of that selective breeding is a product that drives tolerance and dependence much faster. Today's user is consuming a severely unbalanced chemical profile.
You are flooding the CB1 receptors with massive doses of the addictive half of the plant, and you are getting almost none of the natural protective buffer.
Exactly. If you look at cannabis from 40 years ago, the ratio of THC to CBD was much closer to a balanced 1-to-1. Today, you routinely see dispensary flower with 30% THC and less than 1% CBD.
And that is before we even talk about concentrated vapes and dabs, which can push THC levels to 90%.
Right. So the people who are struggling to quit today are fighting a completely different biological battle than someone who was smoking a few decades ago.
Their brains have been subjected to a much more aggressive form of downregulation. The control room has been completely hijacked by high-potency THC without any CBD to moderate the panic response or protect the nervous system.
And because of that, the deficit they experience when they stop is much steeper.
So because users are currently consuming products entirely stripped of this natural buffer, the question becomes a very practical one. Can reintroducing CBD actually help someone who is actively trying to quit THC right now? If someone is sitting there in their first week without weed, is a bottle of CBD oil going to help them, or is it just a placebo?
We must provide honest, realistic framing here. CBD will not prevent withdrawal. It does absolutely nothing to satisfy the profound craving for the high itself.
If you take it hoping to quiet the loud voice in your head that wants to get stoned, you will fail.
Because the brain is still screaming for the master key to hit those primary CB1 receptors.
That makes perfect sense.
However, because CBD has recognized anxiety-reducing properties, and because it interacts with your serotonin and sleep systems, it may take some of the edge off the early withdrawal anxiety.
Which is important because many users experience severe insomnia, night sweats, and generalized agitation when they first stop THC.
Yes. The subtle modulation provided by CBD can be mildly helpful for sleep support and calming the nervous system. It acts as a possible support bridge for those physical symptoms.
A support bridge, but definitely not a cure for the underlying dependence.
It is not a cure. It is an optional tool.
My concern with treating it as a tool involves the reality of actually buying it. The CBD market is highly unregulated. People are buying oils and gummies from gas stations, supermarkets, and random online vendors with zero oversight. Are users risking accidental consumption of THC while they are desperately trying to get clean?
That is a very real and highly documented risk. Pure, isolated CBD will not trigger a positive drug test, and current clinical evidence shows it does not produce physical dependence of its own. Mechanically speaking, it is safe.
But the reality of the retail market is a completely different story.
Yes, because the labels on these bottles lie all the time. Many unregulated, full-spectrum CBD products contain trace amounts of THC.
And if you are consuming these products daily or taking heavy doses to manage your withdrawal anxiety, those trace amounts of THC can accumulate in your fat cells. Quality and dosage vary wildly from bottle to bottle in an unregulated market.
They absolutely do.
So you might inadvertently prolong your own dependence. You think you are being responsible and taking a non-intoxicating supplement to help you sleep, but you are actually dripping small amounts of the master key back into the control room every single night.
Which prevents the brain from fully upregulating its own receptors. You are slowing down the mechanical repair process.
You might even trigger a positive screen if you are being tested for employment, all while believing you are totally clean.
Anyone using CBD as a bridge needs to be extremely careful.
Since CBD is clearly just an optional, imperfect tool and definitely not a replacement, we need to set realistic expectations for the actual process of quitting THC. People need the unfiltered truth about what the timeline looks like. You cannot expect CBD to do THC's job, but you also do not need to write it off as useless either.
You just have to treat it as one optional supplement among the larger, basic lifestyle changes required to get clean.
Setting realistic expectations requires dismantling some persistent myths about the quitting timeline. First and foremost, there are no fixed timelines for getting clean.
There really are not.
I hate when people confidently say you will be fine in exactly 30 days, or that it takes exactly 2 weeks to feel normal.
It is completely inaccurate and sets people up for failure. Every individual's brain chemistry, usage history, the potency of the products they consumed, And their body fat percentage dictates their specific biological recovery rate.
It is a very individual process.
Furthermore, I strongly reject the common framing that the first few days are always the hardest part of the journey.
Wait, really? Because people always talk about the first 72 hours like it is the ultimate mountain to climb. You always hear about the night sweats and the lack of sleep.
The acute physical symptoms absolutely peak early. The sweating, the vivid dreams, the total inability to sleep will hit you in the first week. But the emotionally hardest stretch is often what we call the resilience phase.
The resilience phase. This is the hard middle of the journey.
Yes, the initial burst of motivation to quit has faded. The body is mostly clear of the acute physical symptoms, but the dopamine system is still deeply depleted.
So the internal control room has not fully rebuilt its receptors yet. The machinery is sitting there, but it is not functioning optimally.
Exactly. The brain has to learn how to operate the controls manually again, without the master key doing all the heavy lifting.
I would imagine that manual operation is exhausting for the user.
It is deeply exhausting.
Yeah.
During the resilience phase, users face weeks of emotional flatness and anhedonia.
Meaning the sheer inability to feel pleasure from normal, everyday things.
Yes. Food tastes boring, music sounds dull, your hobbies feel entirely pointless, and you face the daunting reality of navigating daily stress without your primary chemical coping mechanism. Life just feels gray.
If someone is struggling badly during this specific phase, they need structured, real support. They need human connection, therapy, or a structured recovery framework.
They absolutely do.
A botanical supplement is not going to fix the profound psychological challenge of rebuilding a life without a chemical crutch. CBD is not going to teach you how to handle a bad day at work without getting high.
It absolutely cannot do that. The resilience phase requires behavioral tools, not just chemical modulation. The brain is doing the incredibly hard work of neuroplasticity.
It is physically rewiring itself to find joy and calm and natural stimuli without the presence of THC.
And that process requires immense patience. It requires active lifestyle changes like cardiovascular exercise to generate natural endorphins and strict sleep hygiene to support the rebuilding of those neural pathways.
Knowing which specific compound caused the problem is the first necessary step to regaining control of your life. You're fighting a reversible biological adjustment to THC. Your brain simply adapted to the high-potency products you consumed, and given the chance, it will adapt back.
It is a mechanical process, not an unbeatable force. And CBD is just one small, optional piece of the much larger puzzle of recovery.
Before we sign off, I want you to consider something. If the commercial industry spent decades quietly breeding the protective, anxiety-reducing elements out of the plant just to maximize your physical dependence, what does that say about the safety of the products they are marketing to you right now? For more on getting through this, head to quit-smoking-weed.com.